So John is National Director of Project Welcome Home Troops, a program associated with the International Association of Human Values. And this nonprofit teaches effective mind-body resilience to combats coming home, and actually veterans from past wars. He's lectured at the United Nations, the World Bank, World Health Organization at Harvard, and Wharton School of Business. And he's also here with Dr. Dara Garamani, who is Senior Research Scientist at UCLA Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences. He received his PhD in neuroscience and psychology at Stanford University, and it's my honor to welcome these two. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Glenda and Joe, for this opportunity. And I have to say, Rudy, it's not so easy following you either. Fortunately, I won't be playing any music today, but I'd like to begin today by taking you on an imaginative journey. It's a sobering imaginative journey where a great pandemic has spread across the world, and it's hit especially hard here in the United States. Already this pandemic has affected 300,000 to 400,000 people, and 22 people are dying from this pandemic every day. Unfortunately, this is not an imaginative journey. I'm talking about the series of neurological symptoms known collectively as post-traumatic stress disorder. 300,000 to 400,000 people are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan already afflicted with this problem, and 22 vets are committing suicide a day from the effects of post-traumatic stress syndrome. I was first introduced to this pandemic, if you'd like to call it that, or this difficulty that's facing us, by a person named Walter. I was teaching these breathing techniques and meditation to civilian populations at that time in Santa Barbara, California, and I got a call from a psychologist who said, "I think I have someone who could benefit from your program, but I'm not sure if you can handle him." And I asked him why, and he said, well, I have a patient who is drug addicted, suicidal, violent, a danger to himself and others, and oh, by the way, he's a Vietnam vet. And so what I did is I gave that course away to another teacher, and I took the course alongside Walter. I was his buddy on that course, and it was a very difficult course for him because he had a lot of problems from his past that were preventing him from being in the present, from living in the present moment. But he did get through that course, and then I lost touch with him for a long time, and I was doing an event fairly similar to this in Santa Monica, California, about 5 years later. Big, tall guy came up in a reception line in a suit and tie, grabbed me, hugged me, lifted me off the ground, and gave me a big grin, and I couldn't figure out who it was because I couldn't recognize him quite. And he realized that I couldn't recognize him because he changed a lot, and he said, "John, I'm Walter." And Walter was, by that time, the head of data processing for the county of Santa Barbara. He had a girlfriend, he had a car, he had a bank account. He was off all his medications, and he was living a normal, happy life. Now, the degree to which the work that I'd done with Walter affected his future, I'll never know. But it planted a little seed in my mind. And then several years later, a friend and colleague named Deborah Lanya called me and said she'd had some interactions with some Marines in Orange County Vet Center in Southern California. And she'd met them in a bar, and I don't know if it was because she was attractive or because they liked what she had to say, but they had invited her into their vet center, and she was going to give a demonstration of our breathing techniques, and would I come and be with her? And the effect of the breathing techniques on these people that were recovering from post-traumatic stress was so dramatic that we founded a program called Project Welcome Home Troops. 8 years later, we've treated about 1,000 vets and their families around the country, and several years ago, some research began to be formulated about the effect of these techniques, especially on the brain. And what we're going to show you today is the very first preliminary research findings that show how especially particular techniques of the the breath can affect long-term brain functioning on a permanent basis. I'm going to call Dr. Dara Garamani up here in just a moment. But some of our vets wanted to be with you today, so we're going to show a short 5-minute video about some of their comments and experiences about this program, and then we'll show you the research. Can we run the video, please?
The first time I took the course in Fort Worth, Texas was 10 months ago.
I had no idea what to expect, and as we got into the program, and started to do the exercises and do the breathing and so on, I thought, yeah, this might be all right. This might help.
At first, I thought it was a little bit hokey, you know, for first coming in. And
the more we got into it, the more it stopped being just a bunch of hippie nonsense. It started dislodging certain internal barriers, I guess, I had built up.
I think also by like day 2 or 3, you started building that camaraderie between the people within the group, which was nice.
The end session there where we did the power breathing was the ultimate. I thought, wow, I was just so relaxed.
You know, right away with the breathing exercises, it taught me how to relax.
It's almost like you have to get way deep down in there with all of that deep breathing, and then it just seems to take it all and you exhale it all out.
My son stopped over, and we're shooting the breeze, and he's a pretty direct kid. He says, "Hey, Pop, VA got you on some new drugs or what?" So I thought, you know, it's not just me that notices it.
When I finished the course, I didn't notice the changes immediately. Everyone around me did.
I felt like I did before I ever went to Iraq the first time.
It's surreal to have someone come up to you and say something like, "Why are you happy all the time? You're smiling again. Did something change?"
I am a different person now. Just night and day.
You know, you're really, it's like you're you again from 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
My ex, he said, "I really like this new guy, you know. You remind me of the guy that I had met years ago."
so I can focus and concentrate better when I'm at school. And I can be around other people.
My mood goes like this, as opposed to spikes.
The particular techniques that we teach are very effective and very popular with veterans. Number one, because they like learning something that they can do on their own. They're very self-reliant, independent people. Number two, it's preferable to a lot of people to other treatments like psychiatric drugs or long-term psychotherapy. And number three, it's highly effective. And they like doing it in a class with other vets. They bond with other vets. They do the program ongoing with other vets. And many of them now are out finding other vets that need to take the program.
I don't know, the breathing just opened up something in me where it's just, I could just feel better about myself. I realized that there was some things I may have done, but that I had to do in order to survive, in order to be here today. If not, I wouldn't be here.
Just on a completely practical level, I sleep at night, and I don't have to take a handful of meds to do it.
I'm not taking any medication for anxiety. I'm not taking any sleep aids. I'm not taking any meds. And that is not a giant step, that's a giant leap.
Now I'm a teacher for Project Welcome Home Troops, which is great. Sharing this information, these techniques and the knowledge, seeing a change in people, I think, is the biggest driving force.
About a week before I came on this course, I was in the hospital for 5 days. Major depression. Really didn't give a damn if I lived, you know. I really think that I have improved about 75% in just the last 2 months.
I'm going to keep doing it. I don't know how it works. I don't know why it works, but it works for me.
And that's where this program really probably helped me more than anything, is it kind of gave me myself back, you know.
At the path that I was going prior to having done the exercise with you guys, I don't think I would have made it 10, 20 years. So when you're asking me now 20, 30 years down the line, I'm looking at it as a present, something that's just a gift that's been given to me. Maybe one more chance to get things right.
One of the sad things about this film is that when we made it 2 years ago, there were 18 vets a day committing suicide. Now that number's up to 22. And so we hope this program is literally saving lives. We saw that it worked right from the beginning, but we didn't know how or why it worked and what its effect on brain function was. But the first pilot study showing the connection between brain function and wellness and this program is just about to be published this week. And here with us to discuss that study is my colleague, Dr. Dara Garamani. Please welcome him.
Thank you. So what I'm going to talk mainly today about is the study that John mentioned, which was conducted by my colleague, Dr. Emma Sepala, who's currently at Stanford at the Center for Compassion and Altruism and Research and Education. She conducted this work in Dr. Richard Davidson's lab at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So just to tell you a little bit about PTSD and how it's defined, it's an anxiety disorder that develops after exposure to trauma. And it's characterized as with intrusive thoughts. These people have a lot of avoidance, emotional numbness, and withdrawal. They're hypervigilant, and they're very prone to be easily startled. High level of anxiety and insomnia, as you heard in some of the vets that spoke in the film. And 20% of the 2 million plus veterans returning from Afghanistan and Iraq are impacted by this. And this is estimated as fairly conservative. And as John mentioned, the suicide rate is really quite startling. So there are more veteran suicides, deaths resulting from suicides than deaths from combat in the 3 years of these wars combined. So what are the consequences and common problems of this disorder? It's associated with marital and relationship problems. Many of the veterans, when they come back, their marriages end up in divorce. They have a lot of problems with substance abuse, depression, rage, and violence. They have trouble concentrating and attending, so they have trouble keeping their jobs. And as was mentioned, they often have suicidal tendencies. So what are the current treatments for PTSD? Predominantly, it's pharmaceutical. This would include SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. In terms of therapies, psychological therapies, it includes exposure therapy. This is where someone is exposed to the very stimulus that causes or triggers the traumatic experience. Or cognitive behavioral therapy, which involves sort of rethinking about the sources of the trauma and the symptoms. But there's several problems with these approaches. There's a high dropout rate. Pharmaceuticals have a lot of aversive side effects with mixed results. Often the side effects are treated with more pharmaceuticals. And in terms of the behavioral therapy, a lot of the vets have trouble revisiting the trauma, and this often ends up backfiring, and they have greater substantial residual effects. And also, and this is probably the major barrier to treatment in this population, is there's a stigma in seeking psychological help. This is partly due to this unwillingness to be seen as a victim or to feel like they're dependent on another person to deal with their problems. These are people who are trained to become very independent, and to have to rely on other people in this way is really a big hit for them. So the question proposed by my colleague was, can a breath-based meditation intervention decrease PTSD symptoms in recently returned veterans? And this stems from a prior study on people who suffered from PTSD as a result of being exposed to natural disasters like a tsunami. So a study was conducted among PTSD, people suffering from PTSD who had undergone the tsunami in Southeast Asia in 2004. And it showed some very interesting results showing reductions in PTSD symptoms. So the study conducted here was done, it's a very small study done on 20 veterans with PTSD, recent veterans. 10 underwent this breath-based meditation intervention, or the Power Breath workshop that's taught by Project Welcome Home troops. The intervention involves controlled breathing, and specifically the Sudarshan Kriya yoga breathing techniques, gentle yoga postures, some group processes where they share their experiences with each other, various discussions, and this would be about 3 hours a day over 7 days. You might recognize some of these individuals from the film clip you just saw. So the study had 4 time points of measurements, right before the workshop, immediately after, 1 month later, and then again 6 months later. And what was measured was PTSD symptoms and sleep. These are self-report measures. And also psychophysiology, so physiological measures of anxiety, in particular the startle response and respiration. I'm just quickly showing you the results here. In blue is a control group that didn't go through the intervention. They eventually got the workshop 6 months later. But what you see here is this dramatic reduction in hyperarousal. This is a primary symptom of PTSD. Reduction of arousal, not just from time 1 to time 2, but we see this reduction maintaining over 6 months at time 4. And also, this change in hyperarousal was correlated with a physiological measure of anxiety, this change in the startle response. So the more change that they experienced personally, that they reported on in hyperarousal, was correlated with the change in this physiological measure of anxiety. And so in the video, you saw several of the veterans talking about sleep, how their sleep had improved. When this was measured, they found that, again, not just from right before to right after the workshop, but 6 months out, they still preserved this improvement in sleep. So to answer that question, this breath-based meditation can be highly effective in reducing stress, reducing negative emotions. And this is entirely without any sort of pharmaceutical intervention. It's all based on these breathing techniques, these powerful breathing techniques. So we showed that this is, or my colleagues showed that this is effective. What's in the works now is analysis of some brain imaging data to see what was happening in the brain in these individuals. But I think, given that this is the Aspirin Brain Lab, and I would be remiss without showing you some data about the brain, I'm going to talk about what could be at play here. Just to reiterate, that a main benefit of this is that there's no side effects of medications. It's a simple physical practice. It's inexpensive, easy to learn, and they can take it with them wherever they go. Okay, so what about the brain? So healthy brains function in this manner, where you see on the right is the prefrontal cortex, and this is the part of the brain that's important for self-regulation. So regulating any sort of response to threat that might come up, or response to stress that might come up. What happens in the stressed or the depressed brain is that this front of the brain kind of shuts down, and it's unable to regulate these other parts of the brain, these sort of older brain areas that trigger or signal sources of stress or sources of threat. What I can show you now is a study that I've done in adolescents who've gone through this workshop, this breath meditation workshop. They're students, high school students from inner city LA high schools who could be argued they face just as much traumatic stress as these veterans, although I'm sure not quite as much, but they literally live in war zones. And what we've found so far is that while they're undergoing MRI imaging, so while we're recording their brain activation and they're performing a task that involves regulating their own emotions, what we see is that after this breath-based meditation, they're increased these two, this frontal part of their brain. So what you see here on the left and right, these two red blobs here, represents activation that corresponds to increased prefrontal cortex activation while doing emotion regulation. So these preliminary data show some promise in the sense that we really are seeing this reemergence of the prefrontal cortex, coming it back online with these sorts of meditation. Thank you.
Now, are you going to do the breathing or not? Y'all aren't going to do the breathing?
I'm going to take some questions.
You're going to take some questions? Okay. Well, we have time for a couple of quick questions.
You know, I'm not a scientist, and I have a lot of trouble reading graphs, as I'm sure some of you do. And I really enjoyed Dara's presentation. But one take-home you might take with you is that the average reduction in post-traumatic stress syndromes among the vets was 40 to 50% in a 7-day program. And the fact that that stayed with them, whether or not they practiced the breathing after the program 6 months later, you know, we hope that this will inspire a lot of other scientific study, because the fact that some breathing activity could cause permanent change in the functioning of the brain, even 6 months later, is something that we really want to explore more. And maybe we can take some questions from the audience.
Yeah, let me mention one thing. If you can bring the mic down here to the woman in the purple shawl. We want to get your questions on the mic because we're videotaping this and we'll be putting that up.
Great job.
Actually down here. But you can go ahead, and then we'll take
Just wondering if we can get a taste of the breath workshop, or if that's crazy. How long does it take to learn properly, and if we can try some of it?
There's 3 or 4 different kinds of breathing that we teach, and the most transformative does take some time over 2 days. So maybe we can arrange some other time afterwards. If there are not enough questions, we could give a little demonstration now, but it's a little hard to do in such a short amount of time.
So that was my question.
We maybe take one more question and then we can do that. It's funny, people are saying that because we did a presentation at a hospital in Delaware to the staff in order to get access to the vet patients. And one of the hospital personnel raised their hand timidly, and they're like, some of us have PTS too. Could you teach us as well as, so yeah.
One more question.
Excellent work. I want to congratulate you on that. Have you ever thought of using imagery as well as deep breathing practice and to alleviate the post-stress syndrome?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is some imagery used on the course on the part of the vets coming from their side. I can talk to you afterwards on the break about how we do that, but that's a great question. Maybe one more quick one over there, and then we'll see what we can demonstrate here.
Wait, can you answer your question with the microphone?
Are you training teachers to teach this right now?
We are. This requires special training, as you can imagine, with the people in the condition that they come into in the room. So we started training people who have long experience in teaching this first to civilian populations, but the most promising part of the program for us is that we're now training vets who have graduated from the program. And if my vision is correct, in another 2 or 3 years, this program will be completely vet-run by people who've graduated from the program.
Okay, we're going to stop the questions.
Depending on the kind of breathing we do, maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, something like that.
I think we're going to have to move on to the next thing, unless you can do it in 2 minutes. Can you do it in a couple minutes? We're going to have the abbreviated breathing.
Or as the guy earlier said, ooh, what do we do? Okay, we'll teach you one very short breathing technique. When we teach it to students in Southern California, they call it their Starbucks breath. And it's a classical yoga technique to bring a lot of prana or energy into the body. You're going to have to do it in your seats and not injure the person next to you. But put your hands up like this, in baby fists, elbows close. I think it's better to sit. But be careful of your neighbor, okay? And we're going to take a normal breath in. This is called Bhastrika, or bellows breath. Normal breath out. Then using normal breath through the nose, I want you to breathe in and at the same time raise your hands up into what we call the Glory Hallelujah pose. Grab an invisible bar and bring it down sharply so your elbows come back on an exhale down into your ribs. In, out. 5 in a row. In, out. Together. In, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. And close your eyes. Back to normal breathing. And feel where that energy wants to go in your body. Just a little introductory breathing. You can do it in the morning, 15 to 20 reps, 1 or 2 sets. Skip your normal cup of Starbucks coffee. I'd like to finally, and if there are any vets in the room, could they raise their hand? There's some vets sitting here in the back. Our program is entirely volunteer driven. We don't charge the vets. We have a feeling that they put their lives on the line for all of us, protecting us here and helping them when they come back is the least they can do. So thanks again for all the people who served our country.